Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is 2/23/24. Want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. We also want to thank today's guest, Janice, for introducing us, his mom, Zanja Yudell. Where in the heck you calling in from?
I am in Chico, California.
Chico, this is part two. I really enjoyed part one. I appreciate your time and energy. And McLuhan talked about everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid, and even non-tangibles, say philosophy or religion, might extend consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, since you're an author, this is a tool you use. What humanness does the writing utensil extend for you?
Well, geez, that's a tough one. Um, I mean, I don't think this is a glib answer exactly, but in particular, touch typing, I've always really enjoyed it because there's something just feels, when I learned to touch type, it had this sort of magic quality to it. And one of the things I appreciate about it, I think, is the sort of unconscious automaticity that just
Yeah.
happens. So maybe in a way, writing, one of the things it extends anyway, writing utensils is the unconscious.
Yeah. It's
This
amazing.
capacity to just do things without thinking about them. I mean, it's sort of ironic because you use writing utensils to produce thoughts that are often, consciously expressed, but you do it with this mechanism that requires unconsciousness. So that's what I'll say: unconscious, the unconscious.
Unconscious. It's really a great answer. And
Mm.
it's funny because when I asked you the first question in part one, I says, what's the best thing for a human being? I think you said a pen. And then and then you went into love and you really sussed out love well. And I was really, but I didn't go back and I didn't go, did you say pen? Do you remember saying pen right off the bat?
I don't, but I believe you. I could have. I just don't
But do
remember.
you think it could have been something you said, like just off the top of your
Yeah,
head? It could have been.
yeah, it could have
Yeah.
been. Yeah, yeah.
And do you still write with a pen or a pencil, or do you only use keyboards?
If I do both.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm taking notes, I really prefer to handwrite. And if I'm thinking
Yeah.
through something, especially something that has either a more visual element, but also actually, I sometimes will do math as part of my thinking a little bit. And for math, I got to use a pencil on paper. So,
Yeah.
or, looking at possibilities, sometimes I just want to mark it up in a way that's not really possible on a keyboard for me.
Yeah, really good. And there's since you brought up this conscious and unconscious,
Hmm.
there's a McLuhan question that I've never gotten to understand, but I would like you to tell me what you think of this question. He said, how about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness?
Mm.
So he's kind of setting up this thing. There's art, and then there's technology, and then there's conscious and consciousness. So he says technologies are the collective unconscious, art as the collective unconsciousness. But again, he's not saying that. He's saying, how about? He's not even saying, here's my theory. So how would you differentiate, just to go to the basics first, what's the difference between conscious and consciousness?
As nouns.
Yes, as nouns, yeah.
Uh, I guess it's funny. I feel like this. We may have talked about this last time, but I have
We
no
could
idea
have, yeah.
what I would have said. I think of. I guess if I say the conscious, then I mean it as like a mass noun. It refers to all those things which have consciousness, and
Yeah.
then consciousness is sort of the abstract property,
is
which is
the
bad.
abstract. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we could have covered it because that means technologies is the mass and then art is the abstract.
Could be.
Yeah.
So how about that, Marshall?
Thank God. No, it's always fun to tackle it. And even if I try not to repeat from part one. And then I don't know if I asked you this. So again, I apologize if it did. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're writing a book, what role does intention play in your creative process? Or you could even say essays,
Yeah,
article, essay, or a
yeah.
book. Yeah.
Uh, what role does intention play? I mean, I don't write something fictional usually. I haven't written very much fiction, not for a long time, and I think intention is pretty important. But there's always something like that you just it's out of your control. You don't really
Yeah.
know what you're doing exactly, and so there's always this aspect of using writing to help figure things out, to work it out for yourself. And so I can't. It's not just a process of putting down what I already know, but a process of discovery. And in that sense, I would say what gets written doesn't always reflect an intention, but
Yeah.
something that is maybe has to be figured out, discovered.
Zanja, well put, because we had fun when I said fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until and then you went into it really well. But I said eventually, well, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So it
Right.
is that process kind of it's the form and the content are so mushed together that you can't say, oh, well, here's my idea. Now, how am I going to get it out of my head through my arm into the
Yeah.
paper?
This is why actually I think teaching writing is so important, why I do it in my classes, is that you're not just teaching how to communicate, you're teaching how to think by teaching someone how to write. By practicing writing, you're extending your capacity for thought in a way that you couldn't do otherwise.
But when you say you're teaching writing, you actually teach classes that are English literature. You're saying, I'm going to teach you how to write essays, or you're
No,
in the midst of you teaching philosophy, you go, let me give you some hints about writing your essays, students.
yeah, more
Yeah.
like the latter. And
Yeah.
even then, it's mostly, when I say teaching writing, it's really mostly about having people write.
Yeah.
Like anything, you learn by doing and then by
Yeah.
correcting. So I don't even do that many tips and hints. What I do is I say, write something, and then we'll talk about it, or
Yeah.
we'll work on it.
Because were you taught that growing up?
Uh,
How did you learn that, Zanja?
I mean, I probably that's the way to learn to write.
Well, both. Yeah. It's sort of both, like, or wherever, you put in you tell me what I'm asking.
Well, I've had really good English instructors all through my education when I was in public schools. I don't remember anymore though what they taught us, how
Yeah.
they taught us to write. I just
Yeah.
remember that I learned to write. But I think it's just learning by seeing and hearing people who've done research on this stuff
Yeah.
that I know you can't just start from totally nothing. You need to give people something to work with. But really, if you just think about how you learn, often it requires just trying to do it
Yeah.
and then getting some help to see how you can improve it. I don't
Like
know
you
why I think that.
But you didn't take like acting classes or performance classes to know how to stand in front of people and teach them.
I did take acting classes and performance classes. I just didn't do it because I thought I was going to teach, but
Oh my God. So
actor.
so that helped you think.
I suspect that I had a lot of performance experience actually.
Yeah.
So I think that might have helped me get comfortable standing up. But the first time I ever stood up in front of a class, I was in graduate school. I was so nervous. I couldn't vocalize. My voice came out as a whisper. I was so nervous. It was
And
terrible.
and you think your peers though all those people who teach in your college, 50% of them knew how to perform as a teacher, or none? That was like way down, maybe 20% or 80%. I mean, they just throw you in and go, okay, go teach. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That might be different now, but yeah, we got no pedagogy in graduate school.
yeah.
You just get thrown up in front and say, just do what you were taught by other people or do it the way you saw. So you got to figure it out.
And then there's a funny cliche about what you were talking about. Intention is write what you know. And it's almost like, no, you should write what you don't know so you can figure out what you know. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
it's not a 50-50 when creative writing teachers say, write what you know. What would you lean more towards? Write what you know, or write what you don't know, or waver in between?
Well, if I were a creative writing teacher, I would probably just say, let a thousand flowers bloom. I mean, let some people write what they know and some people write what they don't know. I'm a big fan of what's called speculative fiction, or science fiction. I
Yeah.
love reading that stuff. And you could say they are writing what they know. People like Margaret Atwood say she's just writing what is happening around her, not speculating. But I'm happy for people to go off in crazy flights of fancy. That's always enjoyable to me as a reader. I would have no rules if I
Yeah.
were a creative writing teacher.
You're a teacher and you have no rules. That's a good teacher. I bet you guys have a few rules. But let a thousand flowers bloom. Do you know who the source on that? Who said that?
Mao Zedong,
Huh?
isn't it? Isn't it Mao?
Oh, Mao said it. Oh, how cool is that?
I
And
think
then
so.
you'll love this one. Margaret Atwood, when she was 18, she bought McLuhan's first book, Mechanical Bride. And it had a little legal problem, so he was selling them out of his basement, to people. And she knocked on the basement window and gave him like $10, and he handed her the book.
Wow.
That's funny,
Yeah.
Margaret Atwood at 18's reading Mechanical Bride. Well, maybe she bought it. We don't know if she read it. Okay, then Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your essay or book?
The older I've gotten, or the more practice I've gotten, the more I think about that. Yeah, I'm always thinking about my audience, I think, nowadays. I actually think that this is something, maybe it's just a human tendency, but I feel pretty strongly within myself, which is I want to be understood.
Yeah.
That's important to me. And
Yeah.
so if I'm writing, I want to be clear. I want someone to be able to see what I'm doing. So which gets back to the question of intention, of course, because that means that I have something that I think I want to communicate, that I want someone to understand. And I want to think about how effectively to do that.
Well, let's just jump into Joyce for a second, because you've attended our James Joyce Reading Club for Finnegan's Wake, and talk about, gobbledygook. In a way, it's the ultimate gobbledygook, but in another way, it's like very, I don't know what brings you back, but actually, one person wanted to know in particular, your brother. What year was your brother born? Do you know?
89.
In what year are you? What year are you born?
75.
And so he came to our Finnegan's Wake when he was 12 years old. So it was fun because we could put him in the 28 years. We had one member who was 12 years old, and then we had another member who was 92 years old.
Yeah.
It wavers in that, kind of smarty pants literati people who think they know literature who come.
Yeah.
Like what has attracted you? You haven't come that often, but you came a couple of times. Is there anything specifically? Do you have a history with Joyce, or was it just like, oh,
no,
I'll spend this time doing something with my mom, and it sounds interesting?
yeah, I mean, that's why I initially went, but I actually always enjoyed it. And I felt like the same thing that happened, there's something happened each time, which is it was almost like a little magical transformation.
Yeah.
We read through it initially once. At least I don't know if this is still how you do it, but this is how we did it most of the times when I was coming. You'd read through it once. Individuals would read line by line, 2 lines or whatever, and then it it was gobbledygook, as you say. And then we would go through the lines and try and parse them and, interpret, but in this sort of pleasantly pushy way. Like, you don't just sort of get bogged down. You keep going and make your way through the
Yeah.
page again, interpreting it. And then at the end, one person reads the whole thing out at once. And
Yeah.
that third reading, it's like magic.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all of this gobbledygook starts to form into meaning. I mean, not perfectly, but
Yeah.
sounds pop out, because we talked about, a lot of the sound that Joyce, things that he's doing with sound. You start hearing, I always thought of it as kind of like cubism, right?
Yeah.
Where you have these sort of intersecting meanings in the same word that kind of smush together, and they're both present, and you can hear them both at the same time, and it's like a little bit of magic. And so it's enjoyable, I guess. It has that sort of pleasure of uncovering something that was obscure and hard to see.
Yeah, it's playful. You really described it well. And your mom is such a great reader. Often she's one of our featured readers at the end, where everybody can really concentrate on the sound.
Mm-hmm.
And that's evoking T.S. Eliot said poetry can communicate before it's understood.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of reminds me, just not going too far off of philosophy. I'm curious, when Joyce says epiphany and everydayness, you don't even have to know the context. You know the three words. What does that say to you? Just those three words, whether it's applicable to Joyce saying it or just in general.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's a reminder that even though we can get bogged down in life sort of seeming the same, see the commonness of every day or something like that, there's also the possibility of recognizing the uniqueness of a moment that can transform your experience, make you see, feel a little magic or something like that.
Yeah.
See beauty in the world in a way you hadn't seen it before. I guess those are the kind of things that come to mind anyway.
Yeah. That's funny, because magic comes up, that's a word Arthur C. Clarke used about describing technologies and human inventions. And when you said speculative fiction, who's maybe the top one or two or three authors that affected you in that genre? Is there any book titles or authors that sort of jump out that had a big impact on you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of impact, it's hard to say. I read a lot of Asimov when I was young, when I was like early adolescent. So Asimov probably influenced me a lot. I also read a lot of comic books. I was just
Yeah.
picking up an old Silver Surfer that my mom gave me with Jack Kirby, and it's got all this cosmic, imagery, and it's. I feel like that stuff probably influenced me in ways I don't even know.
Yeah.
I can just tell you recently, the author in the last, I don't know, 10 years who really has, who I just love his work, is Ted Chiang.
Yeah. How do you spell last name?
Chiang.
Yeah.
I don't know if they made that movie, Arrival, based on one of his stories.
Okay.
But the stories are I don't know, they're right up my alley. They're exactly there's one in particular, what's it called? It's called The Truth of, oh man, I can't remember the title of it. Oh, I have to look it up. But it's such a great story about. Well, I won't get into it, but
yeah,
he really is. Whatever, he pushes my buttons in a good way.
Right, but again, it's like there's something about speculative fiction, you writing philosophy essays and books. And is there a crossover there? Like, did that kind of morph you into, because you were reading comic books probably before you were reading philosophy? It's amazing how many generations are affected by comic books.
Yeah, yeah.
And so any relationship there between speculative fiction and comic books early on? I mean, early on comic books, then Asimov, science fiction, speculative fiction, and then your calling as a philosopher.
Probably. I mean, I think that thought experiment is sort of at the heart of speculative fiction. right? You're imagining something very different and seeing, kind of thinking it through. And that's very similar, I think, to what a lot of philosophers are doing, which is sort of looking at something and thinking about how it might be other than it is, like considering alternative possibilities. So yeah,
Wow. Yeah,
I
isn't
think
that
that's true.
it's almost a form of sci-fi. It's like we're gonna think this up. It's sort of like write what you don't know, but what you speculate on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be people who will disagree with that conception of philosophy. They might think that philosophy shouldn't be going sort of away from what we are experiencing and should focus on the reality of our experience in some way. But I think philosophy always has this sort of otherworldliness to it, this kind of going beyond.
Well, let's just jump back to Joyce for 1 second because I'm always trying to figure out these 3 words he used in Portrait of an Artist. He says, I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning. Now, you don't even really have to know the context. He sort of put it because he's almost teaching McLuhan that extension. These three words are my arms. They're reaching out. I allow myself to use silence, exile, and cunning. Just in general, what do you think of those 3 words? What do they mean to you? It doesn't even have to be what Joyce means to Joyce, but
Well, I mean, the thing that comes to mind, especially if we're thinking about an artist, exile just seems sort of the one that jumps out at me the most as fitting to an artist's life. That artists, like philosophers actually too, I think, have to kind of go beyond what
yeah,
what we take to be the normal conventions of expressing ourselves, or of making things, or whatever it is that the art
yeah,
medium the artist is working in. And so you become an exile a little bit because you're violating the standards, the norms, the rules of the community you live in, and that makes you an exile. So
yeah.
I could see that one for sure. Cunning, I could just, cunning, think is of as doing whatever it takes, right? Um, using your wits, of course.
Yes.
You can figure out what is worth doing.
And then how about silence? Does that resonate in any way?
Nothing is comes to my mind as immediately. I can think of silence though, maybe as something that if you think of the exile, and it's related to cunning, that the exile has to pick their moments because they are an outsider. And so partly you have to listen and not speak, not express yourself until you're ready to,
Yeah.
because you're more at risk, something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, no, that's funny because you got ESP because the next question is exactly surrounding that word. Leonard Cohen said, the only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know.
Mm.
What role does risk play in your process of being philosopher teacher?
Hmm. Well, there's always a risk if you're trying to express something that other people don't see or don't recognize. There's always this risk that you will be judged a fool,
Yeah.
or judged as, in some sense, unworthy of inclusion in the community, going back to the exile idea.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a really strong risk, but I think it's something you feel a little bit when you put words down, that you could be making a mistake, not in the sense of making an error in the thinking, but making a mistake socially.
Yeah. That's reminding me of I think it's Oscar Wilde, if the fool persists in his folly, he becomes wise. Which is cute, but yeah. But the real hidden question about risk is, what does courage mean to you now? Do you have the courage to take the risk? Because I mean, you've got your job, you've got your career and your calling, and it's all pretty well put together. So is there, just in coming up with philosophies and thinking, does it require courage, and what does it mean to you now?
Yeah, I don't think I think that risk that I was talking about is such a small risk, really, in the grand scheme of things. I don't think it takes much courage, actually.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have many situations where I really do express courage.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big part of my life, being courageous. I was always attracted to this, this Taoist idea that you should just kind of go with the flow to some extent. And I mean, that could just be a coward's way of speaking, you might say, or something like that. But I think there's kind of a tension. I mean, I do want to fit in to some extent, right?
Yeah.
But not in a way that compromises what I think is right. And I think I've been lucky that I haven't had to do that much. I mean, maybe I'm just fortunate I haven't been in situations where courage has been demanded of me, or I avoid those situations. I don't know. Couldn't say.
Well, it's funny, Zanja, because what stood out in listening to part one was this line: "Honesty is a family tradition."
Mm-hmm.
That really stood out to me, and we'll probably circle around to that. But let's move on. This is Michael Apted, the filmmaker. 40 years ago, I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s. Like when you're 5 years old for the MTV. And to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. And what Michael Apted said to me is, we've learned to take in information faster. And I'm like, I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
It's funny, this is a total aside answer. It's a tangential response, but
I love it. I'm open to all those. Yes.
There's this psychologist. I don't remember his name, but I recently looked up this paper, or it was a popular paper, who was interested in this question of like when you're facing a crisis moment, how time seems to slow down, like if you're in a car collision.
Yeah.
And he was curious whether we really do experience time more slowly during those periods of time, or whether we just fool ourselves later into thinking that we experienced time more quickly. So you know how he tried to test his hypothesis?
How?
He threw people off of a 10-story building into a net and had them look at a screen that was flashing images really fast, and to see if they would actually be able to process them, like right the threshold at which people can discriminate like numbers or whatever was the images on the screen, or whatever was flashed on the screen. And then he threw them off a building to see if they could discriminate images that they couldn't have seen when they were like at rest, because they're falling off of a building 10 stories or whatever, and they're gonna feel really scared. Will it slow down time? And as I recall, I don't trust my memory on these things perfectly. The answer was, it's an illusion. We don't perceive faster.
Yeah, it's an illusion.
We think we perceive that we feel like time has slowed down, but in fact, we can't perceive things anymore. We can't discriminate any more finely than we could have prior to the experience.
No, that's a good answer, because the really follow-up is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
Yeah, Daniel Dennett has this line, which is, I can't remember exactly how it goes. Daniel Dennett is a philosopher who wrote this book, Consciousness Explained, which, people joke it really doesn't explain consciousness, of course, but I forget the exact line, but he says that computers are serial processors that we set up to do parallel processing, right? Like multitasking. But the brain is actually a parallel processor that simulates a serial processor. So that what conscious experience seems like it's just a series and sequence of things, it's really a bunch of stuff going on all at once that we hide from our experience to make it seem like it's. So in some sense, I'm going to say yes. Clearly, our brains can do a lot of different things at once, whether they're all practical or whether they're the kind of things that you have in mind when you're talking about, tasks, everyday tasks. I don't know.
Yeah. In Daniel's last name, how do you spell that?
I think it's Dennett.
ETT. And then you said the computer's a serial processor. The brain is a what kind of processor?
Parallel.
Yeah. That's
the joke is that the computer is a serial processor that we sort of make pretend to be a parallel processor.
Yeah.
And the brain is a parallel processor that kind of pretends to be a serial processor.
Yeah. It's really good because the brain is a pattern recognizer. That's one thing we're pretty good humans at recognizing patterns.
And that's a lot of different things happening at once. That's the idea.
Yeah. What was the motive of the cave artist? Your guess or hunch?
You mean like Let's Go or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know. They were bored. They were stuck in the cave. No, I know it's not that. From what I've read, they, clearly they had to go to special spots. There's something sort of, they weren't just like where they were living. They would go deeper into the caves. So I don't think it was just boredom. Well, teenagers might, if they're bored, go deeper into the cave.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've read some of the theories. I don't know. I've been spoiled by speculation.
Speculate, but it is boredom is great because there's a line I use a lot is Aborigines don't have any word for boredom. So does that mean they don't get bored? No, they probably get bored, but they don't use the word we use. What do you think? That they do get bored or they don't get bored? If you don't have a word for it, does that mean you don't do it?
No, definitely that's not true. I mean, yeah. It's funny. I almost feel like this is not a matter of fact so much as a matter of orientation towards the world. But some people like to see the diversity of cultures and humanity and think of people as very different throughout the world in different places and times. And others will look and see the common humanity in all of us. And I tend towards the latter. I think we're all basically the same.
Yeah.
So if we're bored, they're bored. I mean, sure, our environments are different, our cultures are different, our languages are different.
Yeah.
But still, there's a lot of basic humanity that's going to stay the same.
No, I agree with you. It's probably why we have problems is because we're not seeking out our commonality and sharing what we have in common. That's like, is hate cultural? Is it innate or invented? Is the act of hating more like culturally learned, or is it in us innately to hate? What do you think?
I think whenever that question gets asked, is X innate or cultural? The answer is almost always both. Almost always. I mean, maybe there's some counterexamples. You can come up with one, but I don't think hate is a counterexample. Yeah. I think hate is both innate and culturally learned.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's like McLuhan did this thing that I think is funny. It's almost like hilarious. He said, we invented point of view when the painters invented vanishing point. And it's like going back to the cave artist. When did the cave artist start forming aesthetics? Like, well, let's go to this cave. That guy's paintings are really good. And he serves, grape and crackers with his art opening. And the other guy, has, different kind of paintings. And when did they start having aesthetics? Like, oh, this is good and this is bad. Like the Balinese have no word for art. They just do everything as well as they can. Well, that line sounds really good. And most people go, that's cool. But do they? Yeah, we're selling you some Balinese art, tourist. This is the really good stuff. That's why it's more. Buy this one if you want quality. Then there's the cheap knockoffs over here. Oh, I'll get a bargain.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like probably we always have the capacity and the desire to discriminate between quality, right?
We always had that.
Yeah. We might
Yeah.
not have had it. You might not have said this is good art and bad art, but you might have
Yeah.
said this person over here, I like the, the sculptures that he makes, and I don't like the ones that this guy makes as much.
Yeah.
I
I'm
just
like,
think it's natural.
yeah, my friend from England bit into a kiwi once and he ate the skin. And I was like, you don't eat skins of kiwi. He says, I do. It's like, so when did you start going, well, we got to skin this fruit, Why would you throw out any food? Well, that's too bitter. Well, when did you start figuring out something was bitter or not? Did you when there was no word for bitter, did they go, oh, they just ate it and go, oh.
Well,
Different.
I'm told, I've read or heard or whatever that bitterness is, a sign of poison if you're trying out food.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is
Yeah.
why, children supposedly are much more sensitive to bitter than adults because they haven't learned yet what's safe to eat and what's not safe to eat. So they're very quick to avoid foods that are bitter for less, because their ancestors who didn't do that would have died because they would have
Oh
eaten
my
poison
God,
food.
that's good.
So innate versus cultural, I got to say that one's pretty close to innate anyway.
Yeah.
Bitter.
Like Junior, you have, that's funny. You knew that mommy didn't want to poison you. This sucks. Like I didn't eat tomatoes when I was a kid. I was growing them in my garden. I was like, why didn't I eat tomatoes? I mean, now I eat a good tomato. It's like, it's amazing. Why wouldn't I have eaten this?
Yeah. Yeah, I was picky like that too.
Yeah. So I know it's both, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, how about I'll go contrary to type here and I'll say compromise. Full stop, compromise.
Wow. Now there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right, Zanja. Wait, do you know literally I ask these questions and I kind of want people to answer them the way I think is, more to my liking. But that's why I ask them, because I get such a wide response. Because one of my friends, who's a welfare lawyer, he's not a lawyer who helps welfare people. He's a lawyer on welfare. And I said, what's more important, conviction or compromise? He goes, depends on what you mean by important. So he shifted the whole thing, to the other third word. But it is interesting. I'm glad you said compromise. Now, the next question is, in your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
Well, luck. I mean, I gotta say, luck is probably at the top in the sense that I had opportunities that made it possible for me to get what little accomplishments I have. And it's hard for me to put ambition next because I don't think of myself as very ambitious.
Yeah.
So I guess I would put skill second.
Yeah.
Ambition last.
It's interesting because, people feel like they're bragatory if they say skill first. I'm like, no. And then people change the words. My friend says, none of those three. Mine's necessity or persistence or destiny or purpose. But the question I asked for like 30 years was, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And I'm just saying, in your observations, not necessarily for you, but your observations of humans, is ambition based more on fear or joy?
I guess, I mean, I say this in a way, obviously I have ambitions, but I feel somewhat less ambitious than a lot of people around me. And I think when I look at people who are ambitious, I tend to see it as motivated by fear more
Yeah.
than joy. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
That's what 80 to 90% of people say. They would just go,
Mm-hmm.
fear. And so, which is funny because, I'm going to try to be a good human, or I'm going to try to succeed. But I changed the question because Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, a couple of years ago put out a book, and he says, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition. So then I switched the question because it was too easy. People just go fear or joy, and they go fear.
Mm-hmm.
Is loyalty based on reason?
I guess I don't like that question because, well, it's what it means to be based on reason. I know I say this kind of answer all the time, but it's not. It depends a lot on what you mean by based on reason, I think.
Yeah.
If you mean by reason something like instrumental value to yourself, then no, because loyalty, basically the test of loyalty is when you do things that are not in your interest out of loyalty to a friend or a person or an idea or a community or whatever it is. So that suggests it's against reason, but that's only a kind of narrow conception of reason as sort of self-interest, actions that you conclude would benefit you in some narrow sense.
Yeah.
So I guess the answer is not on that conception of reason, but I guess I don't think of it as irrational.
Yeah.
Maybe not non-rational, though, in the sense that it's not something that you arrive at through a process of reasoning.
Yeah. It's funny because I've dropped that question for years now, and it just came up, and I thought, why not? Because is loyalty based on reason? People would generally say, no, it's based on feeling,
Mm-hmm.
or emotion or intuition, because you're loyal to your family. But if your friends turn on you, you can pick and choose and go, okay, I'm ending our friendship. But with your family, even if they pick on you, you kind of want to stay loyal, or, and not pick on you, but, have a falling out. It's sort of like,
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I have a friend who did something pretty bad in the past few years, and I don't know how to think about our friendship at this point. And
yeah,
one of the considerations is what loyalty, do I owe this person? And so it's something that is in my mind, and
yeah,
I've been thinking about it. And maybe there's a process of reasoning going on that's going to help me work out what
yeah.
loyalty I should or want to have.
Yeah, it's like if you fear your life or something, you're like, okay, I'm gonna avoid this person. Like a lot of my homeless friends in the boardwalk, they kind of have maybe bipolar issues. And one day they're like, hey, and the next day they're like, ah, and I'm like, oh my God, should I avoid them, or should I just kind of feel it out? What mood are they in today? And I don't mean to just put in homeless, because normal people can have that same problem too. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I gotta say, I rarely notice my inner dialogue.
Yeah.
I don't know what language. It's in a obscure language that I barely can recognize, I suppose.
Yeah, because sometimes people go English, and I go, well, really what I'm asking is, what form is your inner consciousness in? That's my rewording. How would you answer that? What form? Yeah. How would you answer that? What form is your inner consciousness in?
I'm tempted to say that it's in no form at all, because
Yeah.
it's almost like there's no such thing.
Yeah.
Not that there isn't inner awareness, but I'm all surface.
Yeah. No, and that's
I mean,
like,
I don't really think I'm all surface, but I'm tempted. I'm
Yeah.
partial to the idea that I live, that I
Yeah.
am just out here and there's nothing else inside. No depths to plumb.
Well, Zanja, this was the thing that I learned from studying McLuhan and Joyce, is that before words, there were no one died and no one was born, and we didn't have inner and outer consciousness. It was all one. It blended. And then when we made words, we go, oh no, that's your inner thoughts, because you just had them in. Now you're gonna, how are you gonna out your inner thoughts? Oh, I'm gonna write a poem. Well, how accurate is that? It's sort of like Beckett saying about Finnegan's Wake. It's not a description of a dream. It is a dream. It's not about something. It is something. So that's the thing. When you hold a book in your hand, you go, "Oh no, this is a book."
Yeah.
See, it's a book, and then
Thought of a book.
Logic. That's logic, physicality. No, it isn't. It's just, it appears to be that. You read it out loud with a group of people, and you go to that word that you brought up earlier. We have a commonality of consciousness. We're all trying to look at these words and hear them out loud, but almost we're all going out of our bodies and looking at ourselves reading a book and going, oh, that's what book reading does to us. He's trying to help us learn how the invention shapes your behavior instead of just surrendering yourself to the thing. Like if you see a good movie or listen to a good song, you surrender yourself, and there's no time. It's like, wow, you're just floating in this nondescript. Yeah. So yeah, one of my favorite was, I asked this experimental filmmaker in New York, what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew. Now, to me, that was a great sign of a great artist, because that's what experimental filmmakers are, getting their inner consciousness out by putting a bunch of gobbledygook on the screen, And two of my film heroes have this mantra: ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says there's no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever cultures, technologies, and environments are dominant?
I mean, this, of course, is probably a both and a little bit, but I'm partial to the idea of it, the vehicle conception.
Yeah.
Like, sure, of course, there's a personal stamp. You're influencing the direction of things through your specific experiences, but you're not putting out there something that was in there. You're making something as a result of it's like the difference between a recipe and the cake that you made from the recipe.
Yeah. The map is not the territory, that
exactly.
Kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Can art making be egoless?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. But 80% say no. Then this woman said, yes, good art is egoless. And then this other woman said, it has to be egoless. So again, you're finding this commonality, you're finding this universality. Why do all these people fall for this piece of art or find a commonality? Like when Kurt Cobain came out, I was like, give me a break. But there was something about it, wearing a flannel shirt, not being punk, but just being rock and punk, that he hit a chord, and then every kid and their mother wanted to do that same sound. So I was always curious, well, how did he come to that? It might have been he just sort of surrendered to whatever's around him and became the channel for it. But it's hard, because the word that Freud hoiked up is ego. So some people, when I say, can art be egoless, they think I'm meaning egotistical.
Right.
So it carries a lot of baggage. I used to do follow-up when we got into Freud, was Freud right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, now I'm asking you, was Freud right?
I mean, about some things, I guess.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Usually they answer it like this: about what?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, what a powerful figure to come along and say things, and then it just becomes the sort of, oh, that's Freudian. It
Yeah,
becomes the dominant.
yeah. I mean, I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit when I said I'm all surface, but I do think that the idea of the unconscious is such a powerful idea.
Yeah,
It's hard to ignore that
yeah,
idea. I don't know historically if he was really, but he seems like he must have been the most responsible for making that idea
yeah,
widespread in our culture.
yeah. Is perception reality?
Sometimes.
That's good. And back to this line, I wanted to ask you really quick, because McLuhan's sort of called a technological determinist. And he isn't really a technological determinist. He is in some sense, because he said that the radio caused World War II and that the telegraph caused the Civil War. And people go, the radio didn't cause World War II. Hitler using the radio caused it. So he's saying, well, no,
Guns, people. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, but he's saying our technologies change us. He knows the way people use our technologies also changes, but just inventing Zoom has changed me immensely, or just making it, it's telephone. It started in 1939 at the New York World's Fair, same year Finnegan's Wake came out. And then it became a reality in 1968 in the 2001 movie. The guy calls his kid and now I use it daily, all the time. It's television, and it's broadcast live worldwide. So it's like biological determinism. Have you studied that word determinism in your philosophy pursuits? Is that
Yeah, it's a word for sure. I mean, it might in the concept, it comes up the most, I guess, in this question, the debate about whether free will exists or not,
yeah,
which is not, it's not actually a question that I have devoted much time to. For some reason, it doesn't move me that much, that
yeah,
issue. And I guess it's because I feel like I have my answer to it and I don't need to worry about it anymore.
right.
But yeah,
Who's
determinism. It's
who's
actually
the yeah, go ahead.
right?
Sorry.
No, you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, who's the two or three main people who said free will or not free will? Is it Nietzsche or who is it?
Nietzsche, I don't know well enough, and my understanding is he's kind of complicated, but he seems to be anti-free will.
Yeah. Okay.
In some way, but he also, but who is like the biggest advocate for?
Yeah. For saying,
well, it depends on what you. I mean, that's the thing. People use the word in such. I know I say this a lot, but I think this debate in particular really suffers from the fact that people are not defining their terms.
right.
There's that guy Sapolsky recently, who's a biologist.
Oh yeah.
Who I like his writing, but he came out with this big book, which I have not read, and I don't know if I ever will, but arguing that, science has proven there's no such thing as free will.
Yeah.
But from what I've read, it seems like he doesn't engage at all with all the people who have said, but that's not the only conception of free will that matters. And so it depends on what you mean, but I don't know who the biggest advocates are actually.
No, that's cool, because George Lakoff, he said, being a neuroscientist, he said something like, no, we think we're walking around being conscious. 80% of us as operating unconsciously or subconsciously, like below the surface. But me and you, I think we're both conscious for this whole time together. But, there is something below us, or we're not tapping into. Who knows?
Well, and by definition, you wouldn't notice it. So
that's it.
You're going to be fooled every single time.
Well, back to your lying. Just go with the flow. Why fight it?
Yeah, right. It's a good thing, right? You want many things to be operating unconsciously.
That's Auden the poet nailed it. He said, The mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us.
Mm.
So it might be you're just chilling out, and grooving along. And then it might be, no, it's guiding you to, epiphanies,
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, low and high brow. I could read Man Magazine and get as much out of that as Finnegan's Wake. So what's the difference, Well, the difference is, well, now you can teach anything in colleges, but there's not going to be like many, many books written on Man Magazine. There's a few.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few.
It's like, this comic Eric Andre,
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is just like, I don't know if you want to call him a sick puppy or what, but he's successful and he's funny, and he was a trained jazz musician at Berkeley, and he goes, I'm not going to make any money doing this. I'm going to do comedy. And then he's on Jimmy Kimmel, his biggest talk show guest host. And what is he selling? A book. I go, this guy went to selling a book. He's not selling his Netflix special. He's selling a book, and I got it at the Marina Del Rey Library, and I could at least look at it, I didn't read it. So Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
And it wasn't Lewis Carroll who said that, was it? It was a character.
Oh no, it's you're very smart. It's a character that Lewis wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know which one it was, the Mad Hatter or something.
I should say Lewis Carroll wrote. Yeah.
Right.
Glad every once in a while I get someone who's listening closely, Zanja. Thank you.
Right. Impossible things that I have believed recently. Well, nothing comes to mind.
Okay, so tell me one major element of your studies, your calling in life, your philosophy, being a good human, that stayed the same, and one that's changed, in the years you've been around. But you can put it in the philosophy world, your calling of being philosopher, teaching philosophy, one major things that stayed the same and one major thing that's changed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think something that's probably stayed the same is just a sort of curiosity or openness to the world, being willing to change my mind, looking to see what's going on. Probably something that changed is my optimism about what philosophical thinking can get you, how much progress you can make. I think when I was young and I started to go into philosophy, I thought that it was going to explain everything to me. I would be able to I thought I would figure it all out, Why not? It's all there.
It is. And that's just like pull the wool over your own eyes. Then you realize, well, no, I don't have to. But maybe some philosophers do, like Sapolsky says, hey, there's no free will. So he kind of makes a statement. Why? So he can sell books?
He believes it. He thinks, I think he also thinks it'll make the world better if we recognize.
Oh, so yeah, there you go. That's good.
I think he thinks it's a positive contribution to the world. But yeah, I think I'm not hopeful is not the right word, because I don't think it's a bad thing, but I don't think that I'm going to figure everything out anymore.
But I think, and when I've spent this time with you, that you first started studying physics because you're linear, you're more, maybe a little more left brain. And then you're in a world of right brainism, right? But it's sort of this fine line, flipping back and forth. Well, I'm a philosopher, and you can think anything, but you still got to think kind of like there's these categories or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ironically, I mean, partly why this is the story I tell myself. I don't know how true it is. A part of why I got disillusioned with physics is I learned early on that it wasn't going to give me the answers to everything.
Yeah.
And I thought that it would. I thought, well, where else to go? Physics is
Yeah.
the science of everything, and science
Yeah.
can show you everything. And I was so disappointed when in our freshman physics class, we were taught, the equation that describes the behavior of a pendulum. And they said, oh, but it only works for small angles. It's an approximation. And I
Yeah.
said, what do you mean it's an approximation? Like, isn't it just the truth? I thought they were giving the pure truth. And no, they're giving us this sort of imperfect picture of the world. And I saw more of that. And I was like, well, clearly philosophy is where I want to go if I want to get the real truth, the full truth. And I was fooling myself again, but I delayed the revelation a little longer for that.
Well, it's like what some genius say, pull the wool over your own eyes.
Right. I
It's
did.
like, it's like mind control yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me, well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, this is somewhat speculative, I suppose, about my own self, but I think that when I was younger, as young people tend to be, I was overly concerned with what other people thought of me. So I was concerned a lot to fit in
Yeah.
or to not offend or something like that. And I probably still am to some extent, but like any human, less, as we get older, we tend to care less about those kind of things. But I think it did train me because I was so concerned about it when I was young. I was actively thinking about how to fit in, how to
Yeah.
be liked by people. I mean, I really, this is all again sort of personal mythology, so who knows how true it is. But I have this memory, or the story I tell myself anyway, of being kind of young, like 13, 14, and realizing that my smartness, the way I talk to people, sometimes intimidated them or scared them.
Yeah.
Like I sort of became aware of that, and so I learned how to avoid that.
Yeah.
And I learned to listen to people and to make sure I showed them my respect for them and my welcoming and all that. And so I think as a result, I've become a person who is able to get along with lots of people
It's
and
really
is able to. So I think, I don't know, maybe it came out of something like a kind of weakness, but it's something that I think is a good characteristic I have now.
No, Zanja is well articulated. Reminded me the other day, there's some commotion with this exhaust coming out of this car and a bunch of old people standing there. And I went up to the guy and I says, could you cut the exhaust on that car? There's old people standing here. What if that was what your parent? And the guy just goes, okay. And the guy who was also complaining, he says, you'll get a lot farther if you talk nice, dude. And I was like, I was so like, Jerry, that was horrible how you did that. But it's like I'm all antsy. And I always say, don't be a tack dog. And it's usually the fingers pointed right at myself. I'm doing it like a tack dog,
Mm.
and you get a lot more accomplished when you're
Yeah.
talking nice.
I wouldn't have guessed that about you, actually.
Well, yeah, but I'm a hypocrite.
That's a good one too.
I mean, I know how to talk nice, but especially as I get older, I think I'm a little more real.
Right.
Okay, so perfect fellow. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Mm. Maybe when there's great injustice,
Yeah.
motivates you to act. Always at
Yeah.
a cost, I think, but
Yeah. That's another question. I changed the wording. I'd
mm,
say, can anger be a productive emotion? They'll go, yes or no.
hmm
And then someone said, no, put it the blank because then they have to elucidate a little. And this was the funny turnaround. It says, anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank, and someone goes, no, it can't be a productive emotion. They actually went back and somehow figured out my original.
yeah.
Okay. So this one's, can satire be destructive? And, I asked my friend who wrote comedy with Robin Williams. He said, that's the job of satire. But me or you can draw a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us. Some people think dying's destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
My honest feeling about this, I mean, I haven't studied it carefully, is that it's just to make people feel better about themselves, but that it doesn't do anything.
Wow, what a yeah,
I don't
because
want to say that. I like satire, but I'm not sure that it actually ever works. I don't, if it's intended to change minds, I don't think it does. I don't know if it does, but from what I've read, I'm not sure that it does.
amazing, really well put. See, this is what I like is when people say stuff that's not, I go 80% of people say it this way. It
Yeah.
really is. Doing this for 40 years, you see there's a tendency where 80% of everybody kind of answers the same. And there's that back to that word you said, commonality. Does that mean that's the way? No, it means we're all sort of brainwashed the same way because everything can be looked at from many different angles. And that's McLuhan loves Steve Allen. He said, behind every joke, there's a grievance. And, I always say, well, drop the word every, but I think it's important what he's saying. Behind every joke, there's a grievance. What's your thought on that line?
I don't know if I agree. I mean, I know that every is meant to be not universal, but I don't have a theory of humor, of jokes and funny, but I think it could be all kinds of things. And I don't
Yeah.
think it has to be built on grievances. I mean, I can give you a ton of philosophy and logic jokes, and I don't think any of them are meant to be or reflecting some underlying grievance. But yeah,
You
that's my
know,
thought.
Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
I like
So
that better.
that's sort of like, well, which is it? Or have you studied this thing I'm learning about now, the coincidence of opposites? Do you
I
know
don't
that?
think so.
Nicholas anyways, it's basically what I learned from Frank Zappa is embrace contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's the yin yang sign,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of considering both ends, like Frank said, you got to love the cops as they beat the shit out of you on the street. You like tell the,
I'll try that next time. Yeah.
I love you. What's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
I mean, the sense I have is that women just have to live with a lot more shit than men
Yeah.
on average. Not universally, but
Yeah.
they just have more threats and difficulties typically than men do. Of course, some men have a lot of shit to deal with, but
Yeah.
some women have get off less. But there's always something about that. I don't know, something like that maybe.
Zanja, what caused matriarchy?
What caused it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's I probably have no idea on what you. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not even sure I have an interesting speculation to offer. I mean,
Yeah.
I could imagine that there were it could just be coincident or chance events, or it could be cultures where just one group of women got together and it started a kind of culture that perpetuated itself. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it could be biology too. The fact that women give birth. There's a cliche that I'm not saying I agree with, but it's the word mafia begins with the letters ma, M-A, because women run the world, but they let men think they run the world.
Yeah.
I
And it depends what you mean by run. I mean, they
Yeah.
do a lot of things that make the world work, but do they have the power on average? No, I think that's true.
Well, one of the women in our group, when I said that, she goes, "Shh, don't tell anybody."
Yeah, right.
There's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this line, "You create what you resist." I'm not saying you, Zanja, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
You create. I mean, I definitely when you first started talking along this line of thinking, the thing that came to my mind initially is that often resist what you are, or what you think you are.
Yeah.
So that I can see it that way. I think there's a truth to it that if you're engaging with something that you oppose, that can be a kind of propping it up in the community or in the culture. You not just are making it present in your own mind, but you're drawing other people's attention to it if you're sharing your opposition. But I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be universally true. I mean, you can
Yeah.
set out to destroy something and you can succeed.
Yeah.
Although there's that great line in the Bible, right? Is it the Amalekites who God says that he's going to have Joshua blot out their existence? I think it's Joshua. They're going to destroy their existence so that no memory of them will ever be in the rest of the world. And yet, it's in the Bible, which is the most read book in the world. So he didn't do a good job of blotting their existence of their memory out from all time, right? I mean, if God was very clever, then he would have called them by a different name. And so what we remember as the Amalekites or whatever they're called is not truly their name. But
That's really good. It reminds me of that whole thing I'm researching archiving. Like, is archiving more innate or more invented? And, I basically set it up that, Eastern philosophy is be here now, live in the moment. Why should we save anything? Just keep going forward. Move, oh no, you got to learn from the past. Well, Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. It really is, that living in the moment is really hard, but it is what we all kind of strive for. So do you think this need or want to collect our history is more innate or more invented? Like, the Egyptians would put this stuff in their coffin with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from what I hear, you have the people in Jericho or whatever burying their dead parents and their ancestors underneath their homes, right? So that they always have it's not really a record, but they have their bones of their ancestors with them a lot.
Yeah.
So if it's invented, it would have been invented a long time ago, probably 10,000 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to think about that question about where it comes
Well,
from.
but it is, Zanja, like, would you rather teach philosophy? Like, let's just move forward. Well, what do you think? Or have them all read all the past philosophers? How important is that past in teaching what you have to teach?
Oh, well, if you put it that way, I actually think the past is pretty important.
Yeah.
In part because it's very hard to understand what they're saying now if you don't understand what they're responding to.
Yeah.
So I don't know, very hard. You always have to, it always happens that you have to start somewhere, but you can see my students often confused because they don't know the context. They don't know what this person's ideas are informed by.
Yeah.
So in as much as we are, even though we are here now, whatever we are, we're products of a past, and to make sense of what's happening now, I think does require understanding the past.
Yeah. Like I brought up the word Freud with someone, they didn't know what I was talking about. It was like, we kind of expect everybody should know, like, you know, if you say Freud or Marx or these sort of words that resonate, or, you know, how do you find peace of mind?
I don't have, I think I just, I mean, this is going to sound silly, but I don't have my mind not at peace very much. So I just, I continue to do what I'm doing
Yeah,
almost.
it's good. These are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words. 1, who started it all?
No one.
2, are we going to make it?
Yes.
3, where do we put it?
Here.
Who's cleaning it up?
No one.
5, is it serious?
Yes.
Really good, Zanja. We got a few more and we're out of here. This has been super fun and enlightening. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Nothing really. I think I would probably just say hello, introduce myself. I'd
Yeah.
probably say you could, you don't need to be as anxious as you are about things, but I'm not sure it would do anything to say that. So
Yeah. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
How about Plenty of Time?
Oh, like it. They want to scent the glue and the binding. What smell?
Rose.
Oh, very nice. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
In my backyard, and you could make it out of trash. I don't know.
Oh, I like
something
that.
temporary.
Trash is a great answer. I'm a dumpster diver. I can help.
Yeah.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good that I've never had and that I never want. That I never want. It's hard for me to think of what it might be that would be good if I don't want it. If it's good, shouldn't I want it? You answer this one?
You're answering the question with a question, dude. Actually, it isn't a question officially, but please tell me something good you never. Well, yeah, I have cute answers that I've gotten over the years, but I'll tell you. You know the answer I get, the 3 answers I get the most?
Okay, no.
Fame, money, and heroin. That tells you a lot about humans right there.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, a cute one is tell me something good you never had and you never want. An expensive funeral.
That is a cute one. Yeah.
But you know where I got it is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
No.
Check them out sometimes. Anyways, they're sort of like Anthony Robbins kind of persuasion thing that got really big for a while. And they basically came out of Milton Erickson, the hypnotism guy. And I mean, it's interesting where they went and how much effect they had. But it's just It's like an anthropological form of persuading people in,
Yeah. Hmm.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Uh, I I probably would attempt to block the bag of shit from hitting my face,
It's
and
good.
then I would get out of the vat of vomit as quickly as I could.
As quickly.
I
You
think that's
you
pretty
are
much
one
it.
you are one logical dude.
Yeah, yeah,
You're like this, Zanja. One person goes, I wouldn't be in a situation like
yeah.
that.
Well, I would try to avoid it as much as I could as well,
Yeah.
but
But the
sometimes you find yourself in a vat of vomit with a bag of shit flying at your face.
Well,
Does
that's
happen.
that's the whole point, Zanja. I met an Altacocker on the Venice Boardwalk who's like one of my mentors, and he taught me that question. And he says it's like a metaphor for life in a way, and what are you going to do about it? And this woman once on the boardwalk said, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and I'd use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. And I said, dude, that is Descent in the Maelstrom, the short story by Edgar Allan Poe, where the sailor's boat gets caught in the whirlpool and he's swooping him down to death. And he studies the patterns of the whirlpool and broken boat parts to swoop his way out of death. So, what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Maybe it's a sign of getting old that's taking me so long to think of something that I feel inspired by in the
Yeah.
change of the culture. I think, um, I mean, the growing awareness of something like climate change seems hopeful that people might start to care about making
Yeah.
the world better. Seems
Yeah.
like small evidence for it, but
Yep.
it's a pretty small hopefulness, I gotta say. I don't know how long it'll last or how effective it'll be or how much it'll get past the sort of boundaries of parochialism and whatever other things keep us apart. So, but that's
Yeah.
something.
That's good, but it is weird because in '62, Rachel Carson put out the book Silent Spring, and it kind of first taught us the word pollution, and like, that we could help take care of Mother Nature. And I'm from Flint, Michigan. So we already know what pollution is because we knew our river was polluted because of the car factories. Don't go swimming there. Pre 62, we knew that. Then the water crisis hits in Flint, and it's like they're feeding the Flint people the water from the Flint River. Dude, we knew that before the word pollution came into lexicon. It's like, what? That's scary, when you think there would be progress.
Right. Well, but there is progress in our awareness to some extent, I guess,
There you
even if
go.
it's not in our actions.
Yeah. It's sort of like that question I asked is human progress cyclical or cumulative? Like, are we going in circles or are we getting worse or better? And I think go ahead.
I think I like the spiral
Yeah.
theory, it's both cyclical and linear.
Both. It's like a cone. It's going up sometimes and it's circling down sometimes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you read my mind, dude. I was going to tell you the answer and you told me it.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Well, I suppose there's the tension, or there's the question of the balance between pursuing my own happiness and uh, that of others. And I don't know where exactly I'm supposed to, or I should, or I want to put my efforts. I do think
Wow.
that people do need to focus on their own. I mean, I believe you sort of need to help yourself first, right? You need to make sure you're in a good place. But I don't know how that balance should be struck exactly.
Funny, Zanja, the guy I interviewed a couple days ago, incredible culture jammer. I think he brought it up. He says, I think it was on this question, in fact. He says, it's like when you're in an airplane and they go, if you're crashing, put the mask on you before the kid.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right.
So then you can help save the kid. Well, yeah. Yeah.
Right, you got to do that. You got to do that part, though.
Yeah. But the beauty is that that's a question. You don't know, like, well, should I save my own ass or should I save the person on the street's ass? It's difficult. Then you go, oh, what risks are involved if I step out and try to save that person? How has teaching and writing about philosophy shaped your behavior?
That's a good question, and I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how I would have been if I had had a different kind of career or spent my time differently. I mean, I think one thing it has done, just the fact of teaching anyway, having to put yourself out there and be in front of people, it just made me more comfortable with people.
Yeah.
So it made it easier for me to be with people in a variety of contexts.
No, that's important. I mean, isn't that the first thing? It's like jobs like food. It's like, well, why wouldn't you want to be a food specialist? It's something you got to do 3 times a day, No, I just eat this stuff, or anything, health, talking to people, just common things. There's a lot of great artists who are not very good socially.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, don't you want to be a good person first and then do your art? Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I mean, the simple answer, I think, is just trying to be a good person.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds, cliche or simple or naive or something, but I think it's hard to do. It's hard to know what that means.
Yeah.
But that's what it's all about.
That is. I agree. And it seems like, again, back to your word commonality, isn't everybody, even the most scummy, low lifes in the world, they know there's something about us all trying to be good people.
Mm-hmm.
Even in their failings. It's wild. What gives you the most optimism?
I think that people are basically good. People, like, they know how to love and care about other people. So we all have that capacity.
Yeah.
And that's so important to being good. So we can all do it.
Yeah. It's funny because Zanja, the first question I asked And part one is what's the best thing for a human being? And you talked about love and, other people. Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he says, other people. Mm-hmm. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Zanja. Thank you so much. It's truly been enlightening and fun.
Yeah, me too, Jerry. I really enjoyed this conversation and the last one as well. So thanks for inviting me.
Yep. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever.
Sounds good.
All right.